Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Jab Cross Hook. Myself, Amy Kaplan. Reed Wallach will not be with us today. His beloved Brooklyn Nets are playing in the playoffs. So it'll just be myself and Amy, and we will be joined later on in the show by UFC lightweight coming off a win, Jordan Leavitt. So excited to talk to him, but we have a lot to get through before him, Amy. We got to talk this past weekend is an eventful weekend in mixed martial arts, and we do have to do our draft. It will be a two-person draft. But we are still going to get that done. But as always, Amy, we want to start. What are we drinking tonight? I know it's just us two. And I know you're in Connecticut. Were you still able to get something to drink for the show tonight?
No. Well, I mean, kind of. I didn't get any liquor. I have my wonderful Chick-fil-A iced tea. So that's nice. What I've got. Yeah, I felt weird like buying like a 6-pack of something because I'm only here one night. And then I felt like I would just drink it all and that would be not good. So I didn't get anything.
That's fair. Last week, I was drinking my victory wine. I've now made it the thing drafts that I win. The next week, I'm going to drink wine. So I'm back on beer tonight. A little Corona kicking off the spring. Little lime in it. Very delicious. We will recap last week's draft really quick, Amy, because you crushed it. And you should be celebrating this week. I think we might have to go back and check the official results from previous drafts, but I think you set a jab cross hook record. People have gone 3-0 before, but you had two underdogs, two pretty sizable underdogs win too. 3-0 plus 4.16 units, Amy. Congratulations. How do you feel?
Thank you. I mean, it feels silly because I mean, I didn't even want to do the draft. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I haven't had a chance to look at it. This is BS. And so then I just came on and literally just didn't know anything. So that's going to be my strategy going forward. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to look till I'm on the show. That's my pick and I'm sticking to it.
Sometimes that's the best way to do it. But Amy, you obviously know your stuff. You're a massive, you work in MMA media, so it's not like you didn't know anything. It's just maybe you didn't break down, notes like you have in the past. But you still know your stuff. You still know the fighters that you're talking about. So that strategy worked out for you. A minus 110 pick him, and then a plus 175 underdog, and Bilal Muhammad in the main event underdog hit. I was on the opposite side of that. Both had my head-to-head bets. One against you lost, and my head-to-head against Reed lost. So I'm 1-2 for minus 0.9 units on the weekend. So was not able to repeat from my victory the week before, and Reed came second, 1-2 for minus 0.5 units. So
I have to point out my Bellator picks, which were unofficial, also won. Technically, Corey Anderson didn't win, but we can talk about that later. But what I said about the Bellator fights all happened as well.
That's true. Now, I did not get a chance to watch the fights this week. I think I mentioned it last week. I had friends from back home visit me in New York City this past weekend, so I was busy spending time with them. So I do want to talk to you, though, about what happened, because I did read up on it, obviously. I watched highlights and things like that. I need to talk to you. You're just talking about Corey Anderson. Let's talk about that fight right now. Corey Anderson against Vadim Nemkov was ruled a no contest, Amy. I am under the impression that Corey Anderson was on his way to winning, though. So can you explain what happened in that fight? That was, of course, for the, light heavyweight Grand Prix final in Bellator.
Yes, light heavyweight Grand Prix, $1 million on the line. So there was a Grand Prix belt on the line, $1 million on the line, and the light heavyweight belt on the line. So it was a lot at stake. I think pretty much everyone thought that Nemkov would just roll through Corey Anderson. That was not the case. It was quite the opposite. I think a lot of people were really shocked by the performance that Vadim put on, or lack of performance, I guess. And it was clearly looking at 3-0 going into the third. The third was just wrapping up. Timer went off. Actually, the referee stopped the timer at 4 minutes, 55 seconds, something around there, to check on a accidental headbutt injury. They ruled it accidental. Said fights off, he can't continue, and this is where it gets weird. So Bellator brings the big gigantic check in, has Corey's name on it. Corey's celebrating, he's up on the cage. Everyone thinks he's won. They're going to go to the scorecards because that's what would happen if it stopped due to an accidental injury. It goes to the scorecards. But it was 5 seconds too early. The rule is that the fight has to go, if it's a 5-round fight, it has to go through 3 full rounds. So 5 seconds had only 5 seconds there, and that would have made the difference, and Corey would have won. So they called it a no contest. Corey freaked out, rightfully so. I mean, it's just like, I talked to you about how he was feeling like he kind of got the short end of the stick in the UFC, and I'm feeling like he's going to hold on to this. And when he comes back for that rematch, I think it's going to be ugly. I don't think he's going to let it go. He's going to let it go in one round, and that's it.
Yeah, tough break for him. I knew about that rule way back when Michael Bisping fought Alan Belcher. And I think that was a fight Michael Bisping got the eye injury that kind of still haunts him to this day. I think it's even like a fake eye now. But I remember that was in the third round and it went to technical decision. But I learned about that rule then that it has to go in the third round or else it's ruled a no contest. And I think I read, Amy, somewhere that like Corey Anderson was the one who like stopped it. Like he pointed it out to the ref or something. Is that true?
I don't remember that. It could have been true. I don't know. There was a lot going on. I was cage side, so we don't see and hear what's going on as much as you guys do. So it could have happened, but yeah, I mean, it was weird too because he stopped the fight, or the referee stopped the fight originally, and then pointed a finger like, I'm taking 1 point for that headbutt, which would mean it was intentional.
Right.
So then they deemed it unintentional and said no contest. So really he was at a risk of losing too, because if the ref had said 1 point, that means intentional. So there was a lot of weirdness going on there. And Corey Anderson definitely should have won that fight, should have been given that fight.
I assume they're going to do a rematch.
Yeah, that's the plan. Yeah.
Is the $1 million still going to be on the line?
It will be, yeah. We spoke to Scott Coker afterwards. He said it will still be on the line. It'll be just like it was before. Both belts on the line, $1 million still on the line. So just a redo. It happens. It's not ideal, but it happens.
And you think Corey Anderson will win next time around? Because that's kind of my worry. Because I was on Vadim, but I would hate to see Corey Anderson being on his way to a win, and then the rematch doesn't go his way. That would be heartbreaking. You think he's going to be able to pull it out in the second fight?
Yeah, I think he'll get a stoppage in that second fight. I think he's not going to risk that again. He's going to come in with a lot of chips on his shoulder that he above and beyond what he already has. And I think we already saw what Vadim had in him, unless there was some injury or something going on and maybe he comes in fresh. But I don't see, and of course that's MMA, you never know, and that's what's scary about it. But yeah, I think Corey gets it in a second.
And then the main event in Bellator, AJ McKee against Patricio Freire, Pitbull. I understand Pitbull won. If we can bring up a picture of the scorecard, which I think we have, was it a controversial decision? Do you think it was the right decision? Yeah, there's the scorecard there.
Yeah, I mean, I scored it for Pitbull. Most of the media scored it for Pitbull. The fans scored it for AJ. And I think a lot of that might have to do with just, your opinion of AJ. I think a lot of fans really like AJ McKee and they wanted to see him win. I do think that it was close. I think one thing to note on that scorecard that I've never seen before was the judges wrote close rounds. And I've never seen them put any kind of comment on there right there where it says remarks close rounds.
Close rounds. I've never seen that either. That's
and so I think that means like, I mean, it was close. It was it was split even in the back. There was some, Bellator people that we were kind of discussing, who do you think, before they read the scorecards? And some people said AJ for sure. Some people said Pitbull. Interesting. Right after that was read, you could hear someone in the backstage area really upset, throwing stuff around. And the crazy thing was, we didn't know if it was Corey or AJ because it was clear somebody was upset, and both of those guys had every right to be upset. AJ seemed to take it well. I was surprised. He came back and talked to us, said he doesn't want to fight at 145 anymore. He's going to move up to 155, called out Patricky, which is Pitbull's brother. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. But I think it went to the right person. I think that Patricio did win that fight.
So are they going to do a trilogy? Or I guess if they would, it would be at lightweight. Do you think there's going to be a lightweight trilogy, or that's kind of the end of that duo? Not
lightweight. Patricio says he's done. He doesn't want to do lightweight. He said the only reason he ever fought at lightweight was for Michael Chandler.
Got it.
His brother holds the title now, so I don't see him going in there. And what's the point for Patricio at this point? I think that if we see a trilogy, I think we should see a trilogy, but I don't know that it'll happen. I think neither one of them is going to want to give in to the rule set. I believe, in my opinion, it needs to be at featherweight if we're going to be a trilogy, because the first 2 fights were at featherweight, and that would be the only way to really distinguish who's the real winner is if all of the rules are the same as the first 2.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe down the road, maybe we'll see it again. And I also understand that there was a fight of the year contender on the prelims.
Yes.
Rogelio Luna against Socrates Hernandez. What a name.
Yeah.
And we may or may not have photos and or videos of this by any
Yeah,
chance.
let's show the video. I believe we have a quick video.
Ooh.
It was brutal. Brutal. It was one of those fights where the first round happens and you're like, wow, that was a great round. And you're thinking, there's no way they can keep doing this for another 2 rounds. And then they do. And there were tweets going out from all the media that were ringside saying, turn your TVs on. This was a Stephan Bonner type, Forrest Griffin type fight where everyone's like, get on and watch this. And the crazy thing was, those guys, the one who won was his debut. The other guy had fought twice. That was his second fight.
Wow.
It was incredible. And I mean, it's going to get slept on because nobody knows who they are. And I think it's tragic. I really wanted to make sure they got some shine because it was just amazing. I think everybody, the crowd was going crazy. It was spectacular.
So is that your fight of the year? You put that ahead last week's
Chimaev
and Gilbert Burns?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
Because I think it because of their inexperience, you know what I mean? Because it's like high level guys fight like that. I don't say they don't fight like that all the time, but it's not as shocking. These guys are just going out there for the first time. They had no nerves. I mean, it was like they put and neither one of them wanted to go down. It wasn't like that one guy was getting beat up the whole time. It was back and forth. It was brutal. It was really entertaining. And I mean, and I think they probably got paid $1,200 for that. You know, it's like, that's just give them the fight of the year, man. I mean, I wanted to go hug them both. I was like, oh, thank you for that. It was just so good. So good.
Yeah. Shout out Rogelio Luna.
I don't know. Rogelio, maybe? I don't know.
And Socrates Hernandez. I love that name, Socrates Hernandez. Yeah. Anything else about the Bellator card you want to touch on before we move on to the UFC?
No, I think that was there a lot there.
So I guess really quick before we get into the UFC, I assume I know what your answer is, but we asked this question last week. Which of the 2 cards you think was going to be more enjoyable, Bellator or UFC? Do you give it to Bellator?
Absolutely, 100%. Bellator was, even with all those controversies and, you know, with the no contest and everything, it was a way better fight, way better card. And I believe that's the same thing for this week. I think Bellator is going to blow it out of the park again this week.
Yeah, and speaking of entertainment, Belal Muhammad against Vicente Luque. He's getting some trash talk on Twitter. He won the fight. At the end of the day, that's kind of all you really need to do. But Belal Muhammad, not exactly the most exciting style of all time. I assume that he just, once again, wasn't able to catch the fights this weekend, but I assume by people's reactions on Twitter, he just wrestled Luque to the win.
No, he didn't. He did do a lot of wrestling, but there was definitely some stand-up exchanges. That's why I'm kind of surprised that people are like bored by him. Yeah, like I mean, we were all, I hate to say this, but on Media Row, we were all kind of ready to go home. It'd been a long weekend. We're like, oh my gosh, it's going to go 5 rounds and it's going to be this and that. And then as it's going on, we're like, oh, this actually turned out pretty good. I mean, we were impressed. I think he gets a lot of undue hate. I think he's, fans are like, oh, it's boring if it's wrestling, but he did what he needed to do to win. Like, what do you want him to do? Risk losing for your entertainment? That's not how it works. Like that's not, don't ask them to do that. Stop expecting that. Just
and it's not like he's a boring personality. Like, he's an exciting guy to listen to talk to, but that's surprising that you said that, because my reaction based on just people on Twitter were that he just laid on him for 5 rounds. So it's interesting to hear that wasn't the case. What is next for Belal Muhammad in your opinion?
I mean, he's not ready for a title shot yet. I think he needs a few more wins. I don't really know who. I'm kind of trying to think who he called out, and I can't remember now. He called out Covington.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. Actually, I would like, there's a motorcycle somewhere.
Welcome to New York.
Yeah. No, I think I actually kind of like that fight because I just think it's 2 wrestlers, and I don't know. I like it. I just remember that's who he called out. He called him a Karen, which I thought was funny. I mean, I hate to advocate for Colby to fight anybody anymore, but Colby Covington.
Didn't he bring up fighting Chimaev or no? I think he might have the week of. Like, I think he might have last week before he fought.
Yeah,
I think if I remember the quote, I think he said that Chimaev can beat anyone in the division except for him. Like, he was hinting that he thinks he's the worst stylistic matchup for Chimaev.
Yeah, you're right. He did say that ahead of time. I don't remember him saying that after. I just remember the Karen remark and calling him a Karen for Colby. So that's what stuck in my mind, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good line. We still want to, before we get in the draft, and we're kind of coming up on time here. PFL 1, like the first PFL fight card of this season, of the 2022 season, is going on right now, I believe.
Yes.
Do you have any comments about that? I can't say is Lance Palmer still in PFL? He's kind of always a PFL guy I always liked.
I don't think he is. I think he's retired. I could be wrong. This card is the star on this card is Jeremy Stevens and Clay Collard.
That's right. I do remember seeing that. Yes.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm gonna check and see what the latest on my Twitter is. What the latest score was. Okay, so it looks like it was a first round KO just now. Omari Akhmedov just got a first round KO, and then Rob Wilkinson a second round TKO, and second round TKO. Yeah, so there's been 2 finishes so far.
And PFL, for those who don't know, that they do like a different format, isn't it? Isn't it like a season long, like you get points for certain things? And
yeah, so the way it works is sort of tournament style. They do they pick a certain amount of fighters to start the season, and then they fight each other, and then they get points based off if they got a TKO, KO, or a submission. More points if it's in the first round, if they get decision, all this stuff. They lose points if they miss weight. So it's kind of fun that way. And then, they get eliminated as they go. They get two fights no matter what. So they have, if they kind of screw it up the first time, they have a chance to kind of come back and redeem themselves in the second one, which I like as well, because sometimes in MMA, things just happen and maybe the better fighter gets knocked out the first time. But last season was kind of exciting because, Anthony Pettis and Rory McDonald were both in it, and everyone kind of thought they'd end up in the end. Both of them got eliminated in the first kind of section. So it's exciting. I like the PFL format because you know exactly when the fights are, who's going to fight each other. It's just, I like that everything. There's no like, what if, and there's not going to be, no one's going to get a fight before another person because they're trash talking. So they don't have to worry about trash talking each other. It's just fun MMA. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I always found that unique format interesting. But let's talk about this weekend's card. Before we get into the UFC draft, there are 2 Bellator cards. I believe 278 is Friday, and is it 279 Saturday? Do I have that correct?
Correct.
So let's start with 278, the main event, Juliana Velasquez against Liz Carmouche. I always have a soft spot for Liz Carmouche because, everyone knows, she was part of the first women's fight ever in the UFC, and she kind of gave Ronda Rousey trouble at times. People kind of forget that. I think she even had her back at one point. Talk to me about that main event and about that card.
I think this one's hard for me because I kind of agree with you. I think Liz Carmouche is kind of slept on a little bit. I'd like to see her become champion. I think she has all the tools to become champion. But I just don't know. I think Juliana is champion for a reason. I think she can pull. I think I don't know the odds, but I believe it probably is pretty close unless fans are being weird. But yeah, this would be a hard one for me to pick. I think my heart would go with Liz just because it's Liz,
Yeah, I'm going to try to see if I can find some kind of odds here in a second. I'm not as familiar with Juliana. I will say Liz Carmouche is one of those fighters that she's not like the most like naturally athletically gifted fighters ever, but she's just very technically sound, obviously a very strong work ethic, and fighters like that can cause a lot of issues. So I'm seeing Juliana is the favorite, -170, Liz Carmouche +130. At some book. So that's kind of the consensus odds there. So Juliana is the favorite, but you're right. It's somewhat close. Liz is certainly in this fight.
Yeah. And I like the 2 back-to-back shows that Bellator does. They're out in Hawaii. It's going to be a good 2 shows, I think. I think 279 is the better card, but you just never know.
And Jornal Lugo against Danny Sabatello. And I believe you interviewed one or two of these fighters, possibly.
Yeah, I interviewed them both, and they hate each other so much. And if we have the video queued up, I kind of got clips of them talking trash about each other. Give you a little background.
Somebody that he fights over here in South Florida. So I've seen him since before I was even a professional, and I've seen the way he carries himself. I can't agree with the way he carries himself. Pretty much, very mean guy, very snotty, very arrogant to everybody he fights and the people around him. Thinks he's the best thing in the world, when really his repertoire is very limited. As you can see, he's just a wrestler. But just knowing who he's been for a long time, somebody I've wanted to fight for a long time. And in one of his interviews, he says that he called me out. He's been calling me out for years, since back when he was in the regionals and since I was in the regionals. But the thing about it is I actually recorded that, and I posted a screenshot where it shows me contacting him saying, let me get a shot at your title in Titan FC before Bellator. This is back when I was like 2-0. I was a little guy, so obviously wouldn't have to listen to me, but he never responded. And then when he finally got to Bellator, that's when I was already ranked at that time. And then he starts calling me out. So I'm giving him the same treatment he was giving me back then. You know what I'm saying? But it just lies, man. The guy's full of lies. Like, how could you have been calling me out when you were champ and I was like 2-0?
You know, first things first against Jornal Lugo. I gotta beat the shit out of this guy, and you know what? This one's gonna be fun. You know, this isn't just get past Lugo, get to the next one, and then get past Higo and get to the next one. No, the thing is, I love fighting. I love being in that cage, and I love beating the shit out of people. You know, my favorite thing to do is impose pain on people, inflict some violence on people. And this one specifically is exciting because I don't like Jornal Lugo. I'm very much looking forward to seeing him bleed and seeing him suffer. I want to strangle him. I want to see him in pain. And so I'm not really even thinking about Higo, just because not only should I not, but also because I'm just too excited to beat the shit out of Jornal Lugo.
That's quite that's quite the look by Sabatello there with the sunglasses and the headband.
Yeah.
Is that his thing?
I guess so. I mean, I think this fight is kind of interesting because it's for that Grand Prix, Bellator Bantamweight Grand Prix. So there's a little bit on the line, and I think both of them are they know how to sell their fight. They definitely don't like each other legitimately. The first thing that both of them said to me was how much they hated each other. So that always usually translates well into a fight. We'll see.
Consensus betting odds actually have Danny Sabatello as a pretty sizable favorite, -350. Jornal Lugo coming back at +250.
I would put money on Jornal. I would put money on Jornal.
You think he's a good bet as an underdog? Okay. This is coming from someone who went 3-0 for over 4 units last week in the UFC draft. So
yeah, I think Jornal, I mean, he's undefeated, I believe. I mean, they're both good. Danny Sabatello was on Contender Series, so obviously they saw something in him. But yeah, I think that when you look at the two of them just in that interview, I think that Jornal is having a little bit more fun. I think Danny might be taking things a little too serious, and that might translate well for Jornal, that he's kind of taking it lightly. He's just focusing on the fight, not so much his hatred. I mean, obviously it was clear that they don't like each other, but you know, I think that Jornal kind of sees him as like a silly guy. So I'd put money on him.
Let's quickly talk about Bellator 279. Looks to me like it's a pretty stacked card, Amy. Chris Cyborg, who will never forgive for being my biggest betting loss of all time, against Arlene Blencowe, and also Blencowe and Bellator Bantamweight Grand Prix fights. Juan Archuleta against Rafion Stotts, and Patchy Mix against one of my favorite fighters in the world, Kyoji Horiguchi. One of my all-time favorite guys. So give us a little breakdown of the second Bellator card, Bellator 279, starting with that main event with Chris Cyborg.
I think we all know Chris Cyborg is very hard to beat. She's already fought Arlene. That's the person that she got her first submission from. So, you know, we saw how that went. I don't see it going much different this time. I always put money on Chris. The Grand Prix fights, I think, are going to be amazing. This Juan Archuleta fight, Juan Archuleta and Rafion Stotts. Rafion was originally supposed to be fighting Sergio Pettis, who is his teammate and best friend. And they were both really upset about it. And so it kind of turns out well that Sergio is not in the Grand Prix anymore, because now he can go up against Juan. Juan is who Sergio got his belt from. So it's sort of like the next best thing. If you can't fight the champ, you can fight the champ before the champ. So I think this is almost like a final fight. I think a lot of people figured that Raytheon and Sergio would be at the final. And I think without Sergio, people would think Juan and Raytheon will be at the end. So it's kind of interesting to have this fight right up off the bat, but it's going to be interesting. I would put my money on Raytheon. He's just on a tear right now. He's got so much confidence. Yeah, I think it's got to be Raytheon for this one. I don't know a whole lot about the Patchy Mix and I can never say his name, Horiguchi fight, but I would put money on Horiguchi any day. So that's where I'd go with that.
Just trying to look up some consensus odds for that one. Horiguchi's minus 275 favorite against Patchy Mix. And Stotts is minus 260, pretty big favorite against Archuleta. So if the odds are any indication, looks like Horiguchi and Stotts are going to win those two bantamweight fights.
I agree with that.
Okay, let's actually, we're going to end on the draft, Amy, but before we do the draft, let's bring in our guest for the week, UFC lightweight, coming off a big win last week. Jordan Leavitt is joining us. Jordan, how's it going? Can you hear us?
Yeah.
What's going on?
I can hear you.
I love it. What's that?
The phone's just being weird. Sorry.
What's the pink light back there?
Oh,
that's awesome. Or is that like a shade?
My baby's little pink castle thing she plays in. Like a tip material.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, Jordan, thank you for joining us. Obviously, coming off a big
Sorry
win this
about the
last
phone,
week.
Guys.
It's all good. Coming off a split decision victory, I will say, Jordan, on our show, we make picks for the fights. Thank you, because you were the only winning pick I had last week. So I appreciate that. Great win. Any thoughts on the fight? Did it go the way you expected? Are you happy with the victory? Well, obviously you're happy with the victory. Did it go the way you expected?
No, I thought it would be a little easier. But the last 2 weeks of the camp, I got injured, then I wasn't feeling very well, so I kind of just coasted, but he allowed me to coast. So I'm thankful that he didn't fight very intelligently, I suppose. And I'm thankful I didn't get hurt. And, I got to show off some striking, so that's always good.
And your twerking video, that went viral afterwards.
Well, I got a talent for going viral, not for my fights, but for other things, I think I'd be a better celebrity than a fighter.
Did you plan to be twerking, or was it just in the moment?
It was in the moment. I was had a little bit of attitude and sass, that underdog, and I was like, that's insulting. And just my opponent was very confident, and people online were sending me negative things, like how I'm gonna get whooped and all these things. And after the fight, James Krause shook my hand. He said, "Nice attempt," and I was like, "Nice attempt? Okay, I don't think that's a nice attempt." So it was kind of like a little middle finger twerk,
So you mentioned you were offended a little bit that you were the underdog. Did you look at the betting odds? Do you ever look at betting odds ahead of your fights? Is that something you pay attention to at all, or you're just saying underdog because you think people didn't expect you to win?
Someone sent me a screenshot of the odds. Like, how are you feeling? You're plus 140, and I'm like, well, now I don't feel as good, But I actually was about to back out of the fight because I was having some problems with a sickness, and my medication. The antibiotics weren't working because I was immune to the first set. So I was about to drop out, but then I saw that I was the underdog, and I was like, screw it. I'm going to take this fight. So I think the chip on my shoulder is the only reason I made it there.
I love that.
Amazing, though.
Yeah. I love a good underdog. You came through for me last week as an underdog. I appreciate it. That's a great story. Jordan, Amy was telling me that one of the two things that you two connected on right away was you're both fans of books, and you have a YouTube channel a book review YouTube channel as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, none of the people I see on a day-to-day basis are readers, really. So I've been trying to like find a way to like reach out to people, like the small amount of my community that has like overlapping of being like bookworms. So I started like doing book reviews on YouTube because it helps me remember how I feel about a book. And also I find it very therapeutic to kind of have like a hobby to do that isn't just working out or being a dad, because those are both exhausting. So yeah, I started posting some book review videos and book vlog videos on YouTube, and yeah, I don't want to brag, but I have like 130 subscribers, so I'm getting there, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
And you read something like 100 books last year, right, or something crazy?
I read 70 books last year. I read 100 books the year before.
That is crazy.
Yeah, but when I did 100 books was without the baby. The baby's definitely making it harder this time. And also it helped that when I read books that year, I was dating my wife a few years ago. Maybe it wasn't 2 years. But she lived like 5 hours away. So like audiobook, I'd finish an audiobook every weekend just by going to see her. So finding the time's harder, but I'm only like 9 books behind schedule.
So if you're reading a book and it's terrible, do you keep reading, or do you just say, no, I'm not going to finish this? Because that's what I grapple with. Where I'm like, is it going to get better, or should I just kick it aside?
This year was like the first year where I kind of like, okay, I'm going to finish this series another time. Like I usually am like too much of a perfectionist. I have to finish a book even if I hated it, because then all the negative feelings I have reading it aren't going to mean anything if I give up. But then I have to kind of measure that towards how much I value my time. So I very rarely put down a book, even if I'm hating it.
Do you consider audiobooks reading books? Because I'm an audiobook guy. I don't actually read many books, so I listen to them. But I feel guilty when someone asks me if I've read a book. I'm like, well, I mean, kind of. I listen to it. Do you consider audiobooks the same as reading?
I think it counts. Not the same. It's not quite reading, but you're still absorbing like the media. You're absorbing all the art and everything. So I think it counts. It's not technically reading, but if you listen to Harry Potter and you read Harry Potter, like it's the same thing. If anything, it's sometimes even better to listen to a book because the narrator gives nice little voices, and
Right.
you could relax.
I agree. I think that audiobooks are just as good, if not better sometimes, because like you said, you get the voices and the characters. I think especially when it's the author that's reading, because they like emphasize parts that you're meant to emphasize. I love audiobooks.
Like especially if I'm reading like a horror book, listening to an audiobook is way scarier than reading it. Like there's been some times where I'll be listening to like a horror book and I'm like, oh, I gotta stop. I gotta read this. I can't listen to this scene. So I feel like it definitely helps change like the pace a little bit and the feel.
Do you ever read MMA books, or are they all like, do you just want to like escape from life and you read something else?
It's weird. Like 2 years ago, I never read fiction. It was all like either MMA or political science or like religious books. So I was like always like, I'm not going to waste my time with make-believe books. And then like started dating my wife, and she like reads only fiction. And she like started recommending me a few books. And since I was trying to like date her, I was like, okay, I'm going to read the books you like and see if I could like them and see if that could be like my way in, And I was like, oh, I actually enjoy reading for, fun. And I feel like I benefit probably more now because I'm reading so much more. And like when you read fiction, it's like you get to live another life, you get to like live life from a different point of view, and nothing quite like it.
What book are you reading now?
I'm reading several books right now. Like right now, I'm reading like The Shadow Rising, book 4 of the Wheel of Time. I'm reading From a Buick 8. It's like a Stephen King book about a haunted car or something like that. And then I'm reading this one book, like I can't pronounce the name. It's like a Japanese book, Ikeji or whatever. It's like a self-help happiness book, kind of. But I'm like an hour and a half into it. It's a short book. I have to finish it.
Are you a paperback or hardcover book reader, or do you care?
Ooh, so like I prefer hardcovers because they're cleaner. Like I'm a clean freak. Like I wash my hands several times. Like no matter what I do, every time I leave the house, I have to shower. And I feel like paperbacks from like the library, they're filthy. Like you can't clean the pages, but a hardback, I can at least clean the cover, sanitize it. So I'm definitely a hardback person. Paperbacks are good for traveling if you're not worried about damaging it. But I think a nice bookshelf full of hardcovers is like the best thing.
Awesome. I
Now,
could talk books all day long. You have to stop me, man.
yeah, I do want to get back to the fight game a little bit here because I have a question for you because you are a submission artist, obviously, and a lot of maybe not the most conventional submissions. Anaconda choke on your record, an inverted triangle choke. Is there a submission that you have in your back pocket or one that you've always kind of wanted to pull off in a UFC fight?
Yeah, I think I have like a world-class like Kimura sequence. Like that's one submission I haven't like hit as a pro. Like I also put a lot of time into inverted triangle, so that was kind of cool how that worked out. But also it wasn't like the most meticulous, like fancy inverted triangle setup. It was kind of like a bare bones. He gave it to me, so it's like I practice such like specific fancy setups, and then like bread and meat work
right there. Yeah,
but like. My first profile had a Peruvian necktie. And I kind of been addicted to weird performances ever since. Like I like having like the weird stats. Like if I had an Xbox like gamer score, I'd have all the weird achievements.
I'll say one. I've brought this up before on the show. The one that we still have not seen in the UFC. I keep waiting for someone to pull it off is a Go-Go Plata. So if you ever see it being set up at all, I would love to see that in the UFC. I think it was one of the Diaz brothers pulled off in Pride and it got overturned because he was high when he was fighting apparently. But that's always a submission I want to see in the UFC.
Wow,
do you know who you're? What's that?
I just said that'd be a good one. Yeah, sorry. Continue.
It's my favorite. Do you know who you're fighting next? Do you have any plans for when you're going to fight next? Are you healthy after this last fight? Is there anyone you were looking to call out? Kind of what are your plans moving forward now in the UFC?
Well, I don't even know. Like, I wanted to fight early June, but they already booked it, and I was hoping to hop onto the card this weekend. My agent was talking to me and stuff. He's like, "Oh, we have a fight fall through. I think it's a good match for you." It was a 170 fight. Whoever Louis Koski was gonna fight, and I was gonna hop into that. But then he heard how sick I was backstage, and he's like, "No. We're already pushing our luck with this fight. Let's wait until after this fight and see if you could feel better." And then, I hurt my foot because I broke a leg kick record for 3-round fights. So now my feet hurt. So we're probably looking at August or September because I'm a groomsman for 2 weddings in the summer. So nice. I'm loved so much that it's ruining my schedule. So hopefully August.
What about where you want to fight? Because I know you train and live in Vegas, right? So when you fight in Vegas, does it feel as exciting as if you're let's pretend you're going to South Dakota, somewhere that's not normally exciting, but you're traveling for a fight, what does that matter? Do you like fighting right there at home?
Oh, I love fighting at home. For this fight, I stayed didn't even have to stay at the hotel. I went to sleep in my own bed. My baby woke me up at 3:00 in the morning, and I got to put her back to put her back to sleep. I wake up, kiss my wife, and I was gone for the same amount of time I am when I go to the gym. It was kind of a regular work day. I feel like it kind of helped me just minimize the importance of this past Saturday. But the only thing I don't like is that the Apex, I don't get a free ticket for my wife, and I haven't been able to have my family. I have 40-something cousins and a bunch of aunts and uncles, and none of them get to go to my fights. And they're bougie people. They would pay, but the Apex is a little expensive for 40. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, Apex is crazy. It's $2,500 a ticket, right? It's something insane.
Yeah, the VIP experience.
Yeah.
But they'll throw in a tour of the PI,
Yeah. I know they always come by the media room and they stand and they look in because it's a door, it's a whole wall that's glass, and they just look in and I'm like, we can see you. This is what monkeys feel like in the zoo. It's this is so weird. They're just staring in huh, what are you doing in there? Yeah, it's interesting.
Jordan, you mentioned earlier that someone sent you a screenshot of the odds. So I assume do you ever bet on fights?
No, I think gambling is silly in a sport so weird and so weird and variable like this. Can you imagine if you had a parlay and then you bet on a card and it's 2 technical decisions? That would piss me off. That would ruin so many things. I've had cuts, and I've had days where I didn't feel like I should be there. And I know every other fighter has at least one story like that. So I feel when you see everything backstage, and you see what goes on behind the scenes. It's like, why the hell would I ever put any significant amount of money into this? Right. Like, it's silly. People are stupid, you know. Fighters are very, you know, we're special snowflakes. You know, we don't make the smartest decisions. And, you know, it's 15 minutes or 25 minutes, a long time to not do something very, very stupid. So I don't trust them.
Do something stupid like be winning an entire title fight and then throw an illegal knee with like a minute left in the fourth round. Not that I'm talking about experience from betting on someone who might have done that, but yeah, variables happen. That's why I always say that if you do bet on the UFC, bet very small, because it's a tough sport to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
There was that fighter though that put his whole purse, I can't remember who it was, his whole purse on himself.
James.
Yes, and then he lost.
James.
That's so sad.
That's tough.
I mean, it's sad, but also it's like you're an Icarus. Like, you flew way too close to the sun of that. You know, like, we don't get paid enough to risk our entire purse on a gamble.
Yeah, you're right about that. Jordan, well, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it. Congratulations once again on your win. You are crushing it in the UFC. You are what now, 3-1 in the UFC, I believe. We are looking forward to your next fight. Enjoy your summer, and you have fans and us moving forward. So best of luck.
And we're gonna put our money on you, so don't do anything stupid.
Yeah.
I won't be fighting sick or injured ever again. You know, at least not too bad.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan.
Take
care.
you.
Thank you. You too.
I might have a new favorite fighter after that.
Yeah, he's so much fun.
What a guy. Love it. All right, Amy, it's gonna work out anyways. It seems like no matter what we end up doing, we always end up sometimes we even schedule to do the draft early in the show and we end up just doing it late anyways. So we are once again going to finish with the draft for this week's UFC card. What is it? Fight night? I don't even know. Do you know what the official title is?
52.
Right, because now these Vegas cards have like 5 different names to it. UFC Vegas 52?
Yes.
All right. Like you said earlier, and I kind of agree with you, I think the Bellator cards are a little bit stronger this week, but it is still the UFC. We are going to make picks. We are going to have a draft as a 2-person draft because Reed's off watching his beloved Brooklyn Nets. You won, Amy, so the order is first or second, I guess. What do you want to go?
I want to go first.
All right. So first round, I think we're still going to do, although if you don't want to, it doesn't matter to me. Do you want to do first rounds just prelims, or it doesn't matter? No,
let's just do whatever.
I'm good with that.
It's a small card, so.
All right. You're right. Smaller cards, we'll probably just do whatever, especially if it's just a 2-person draft like this one is. So 2-person draft, I have a 50% chance of winning. I need my second win because I think you now have 3 wins. I think Reed has 3 wins. So if you're ready, Amy, with your first overall pick, main card, prelim, whatever you want, what do you got?
Yeah. I'm like trying to find this window so I can look at myself while we do this. Yeah, I think, okay. So like I said last time, I didn't look into anybody. I didn't do any research. I did that this time. So I'm literally looking at the card for the first time right now. And the first name, and I'm just going to pick who jumps out at me, is Clay Guida.
All right.
And I think it's a pick'em. What's it called?
Pick'em. Yep.
I think it's a pick'em.
I
think that's a safe bet. I think Clay Guida is like on fire right now. I think he has like this weird, like, I don't want him to find offense to this, but like old man, like power. The last interview we did, he seemed like he was like coming, it was like a whole new generation of Clay Guida. So no, I think I'll put some money on that.
You won't find me
to stick together.
What's that?
40-year-olds have to stick together. I'm 40, he's 40.
Listen, you're not gonna catch me trashing Clay Guida. He is one of the favorite fighters of all time. He has withstood the test of time. He is the Carpenter. He's been in some of the best fights of all time. I love his energy. I love how in between rounds he belches. It's hilarious. He's an all-time UFC character. He is in the group of guys that I think are kind of like the last OG guys, because right now the people who you see kind of up and coming, the young guys in the UFC, are all kind of like athletes. Like they've been trained in MMA their whole lives and they're kind of more athletes. there was this final group of guys that I'm not saying Clay Guida and these guys aren't athletic, but these guys were fighters just because they like to fight. Like the UFC wasn't a huge glorious thing when they were coming up. They just liked to fight, and that was their hobby, and that's what they wanted to do. So shout out Clay Guida, one of the final OGs left in the UFC. There are not many of them left. I love Clay Guida. Am I going to pick against him, though? I don't know. Maybe we'll see. If I am, I can wait for another couple of rounds now. So that is your first overall pick, Clay Guida. I get 2 picks in a row now. I'm going to start with let's just go with the obvious one here if we're just going to do main card right away. I'm going to take main event. Jessica Andrade -200 against Amanda Lemos. I apologize for the production team. Once again, I did not tell them my pick ahead of time. So Jessica Andrade, big favorite. Well, yeah, sizable favorite, -200. But I think she's being undervalued in this fight because she is 2-3 in her last 5 fights. But those losses came against Valentina Shevchenko, Rose Namajunas, and Weili Zhang, who might be the 3 best women fighters in the UFC right now, at least, around her weight class. Obviously, there's Amanda Nunes up at the heavier weight classes, but I'm going to forgive Andrade for losing those 3 fights. Listen, she has 22 wins, 16 finishes. That is no joke. I don't think Amanda Lemos is on her level. I think Jessica wins this fight handedly. I think -200, even though it is a big favorite, I think there's value there. So I'm going to go with my first fight, Amanda Nunes in the main event. Do you have any thoughts on the main event, or do you want to save it until a potential?
Did you say Amanda Nunes in the main event?
Sorry, I meant Jessica Andrade. My mistake. I got the 2 Amandas mixed up, and the wires got crossed, and I'm already thinking about my next pick. Sorry, Jessica Andrade in the main event, -200. My mistake.
I mean, I think that's an obvious one. I think the reason I didn't pick it is because it's not a good enough. Like, I want some underdogs, or me. Too easy.
Yeah, you like the underdog. So, let's bring up the graphic for the first round. First round recap, just the 2 of us. Let's bring up the graphic here. Is it already up? I'm working with one screen tonight. There it is. Clay Guida as a pick'em. Jessica Andrade -200.
Yeah.
2 of the probably the 2.
Because I'm still new. I'm learning about betting. Let's just say that we only picked these 2, and I won. No, that wouldn't work. Well, let's pretend. Yeah, we both won that round.
Right.
I would still win, though, because my favorite was less of a favorite.
Correct. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
And yours technically isn't a favorite; it's a pick'em because they both have the exact same odds. So.
But it's not a plus sign, so it's not an underdog.
That's true. Yes.
Okay.
So and those are probably the 2 names that are probably the most recognizable names on the card, I believe. The casual fans, those are the ones that they'll recognize the most. But now, since it's snake draft, I picked twice in a row. My pick for the first pick of the second round, I'm going Marcin Prechnio.
Sure.
Definitely mispronounced that. I think that might have been the first name I mispronounced in the show. I think I made it pretty long today without mispronouncing someone's name against Philippe Lins. This is a big stats fight for me. Prechnio. He's Polish. I know that. 6.28 significant strikes per minute. He has an accuracy of 51%. He's fighting Philippe Lins, who only lands 2.66 significant strikes per minute, so less than half the amount as Marcin does, and he only has an accuracy of 40%. And then you look at defense. Prechnio also has a strike defense rate of 57% compared to Lins at 49%. So if you're looking at this fight from a statistics standpoint, it's almost a pick 'em. Marcin is a slight favorite. I will take him at -120 based on stats alone. I'm married to stats. In every single sport, I got to be married to the stats. That's my stats pick of the night.
Cool. Okay. So I'm going with Charles Jourdain.
Okay.
And I can't remember if he's so he's the favorite. Or wait,
very slight favorite.
Okay.
Very
so
slight favorite.
That's what I thought. Okay. So I picked him. It's just the name that jumps out at me. I don't know if he's coming off a win or a loss because, like I said, I did not check. I'm looking at these stats right now. He's the younger fighter. That's it. I mean, their records are almost identical. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's literally on my list. I have Clay, and then I have both of them, and I'm like, in case you picked one, I just picked the other one. So it's like I literally both of these guys. I'm taking names I recognize. Charles Jourdain.
He is coming off a unanimous decision win over Andre Ewell back at UFC Fight Night. Lewis against Chris Daukaus back in December of last year. He is 2-1 and then 1 draw. He had a draw with Joshua Quilibao. Split draw back in 2020. All right, so there we go. We're pounding through this with only 2 of us. It's a little strange.
Wait, do I pick again?
What's that? You have to pick again, but I'll give you a second because the round 2 graphic's going to come up. We're gonna recap the very long second round here with the round 2 graphic. You have basically 2 pick'ems. Jourdain is a very, very slight favorite, and I have 2 favorites. Jessica Andrade minus 200. And then Marcin Prechino or Prechino, I don't know, minus 120. Very slight favor in that one as well. So, Amy, I assume maybe you're going to go with an underdog here. I mean, you just said before we started the draft that you like underdogs. You haven't picked one yet. So are you going to go with an underdog with your final pick?
I am, but I want to say first, I really was tempted. I'm not going to pick him, but I was really tempted to go with Mike Jackson.
I looked at that too.
Because he's a crazy underdog. We've only ever seen him fight, once in the UFC? And of course, we all know how that went. And it's one of those, ridiculous, of course he's not going to win because the guy he's fighting has, 50 billion first-round finishes. But I like Mike. I like him personally, and I really want to pick him, but I also really want to win. So I'm not picking him. I'm sorry, Mike. He's not going to watch this anyways.
So who are you going with?
So I'm going with Sergey something I cannot pronounce.
Let's try Tondozko.
Yeah, I'm going with that guy. Just because I wanted to try to pronounce his name, and he's an underdog. But he's not, so far an underdog that, I could if I pick wrong, I'm going to crazy lose. So, yeah, that's where I'm going with that. I like Sergeys. Sergeys typically tend to be kind of born fighters.
Generally a half decent betting strategy is to bet on Russians inside the UFC because a very high win rate, and Sergey's only loss inside the UFC is to a fellow Russian. He's coming off a loss.
And this card sucks. The names are terrible. So
yes, Rustam Khabilov he lost to via unanimous decision back in November 2019. So this is his first fight now in about 2.5 years. So it's been a while since we've seen Sergey.
He's been training real hard.
Yeah. Sure. You're going off your gut feeling strategy. We'll see if it works 2 weeks in a row.
So terrible.
We'll see if it works 2 weeks in a row. So I had 4 total names written down, Amy, and both names heading into the final round here are the opposite of 2 of your picks.
Oh.
But the one I am going to go with, though, because I did have Dwight Grant over Sergey Kondoziko. But instead, I'm going to fade my guy, Clay Guida. I apologize, Clay Guida. I'm so sorry. I love you, but I'm trying to win this draft. I got to go Claudio Puelles. Let's go with that. Listen, I've already talked about Clay Guida. I love Clay Guida. He's an all-time great. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. But the average age of his opponents in his last 3 wins is 40. That's his average age of his last 3 wins of against opponents. One of them was BJ Penn. I'm blanking on the other 2. Michael Johnson was one of them. The last time that he fought a guy who was in his 20s was back in, I think, 2018 or 2017. It was against Charles Oliveira, who was in his 20s at that time, and Clay Guida lost by submission in the first round. I love Clay Guida, but I wish the UFC would just keep giving him guys around his age, because these young guys, they're just too dynamic. They can just win in too many different ways. They're just a little bit too athletic for these kind of OG guys. So Claudio is a young guy. I think he's 25 years old. He's coming off a few impressive wins. I know Clay's looked good, but like I said, he's fighting guys that are like OG guys. He can't fight against these young prospects, these young guns. So I'm going to go with Claudio. I just think too athletic, too dynamic. Claudio Puelles. Minus 110. It is the other side of a pick'em. So no underdogs for me for this week. So there's a draft. How quick and easy was that? Let's bring up the final graphic here. I went with two favorites in a pick'em: Jessica Andrade, Marcin Pacino, slight favorite, -120, and Puelles, -110. Amy, you're on the opposite side of that fight. You have Clay Guida as a pick'em. Is it Charles Jourdain, -115, and then Sergey Kondozhko at +100. All pretty like the odds. The only one that was really kind of big one way or the other was my Jessica Andrade pick, -200. So, there we go. That's the draft. Any final thoughts, Amy, before we wrap this up? Stack. If you're an MMA fan, this is a big weekend. You got two big Bellator cards. You got a UFC card. While it might not be a huge card, it's still the UFC. A couple of interesting fights, and you have PFL, which is going on right now. Do you have any final thoughts?
I think as much shit as I've talked about this UFC card, still watch it, because you never know. Like, sometimes those shit cards end up being fucking fantastic, because those fighters know, like, we got to put on a performance because we're all they got. It's like a lot of times that's what happens. And start from the first fight. Don't come in just at the main card. It drives me nuts. Watch the whole thing.
That's a great point, Amy. I find like sometimes the cards that you think are going to be the worst end up being the best, just from pure excitement level. And then sometimes fights and cards that look stacked end up being a lot of boring fights, even though you recognize the names on it. So great points. If you're a fight fan, this is the weekend for you. So if that's it, thank you to Jordan Leavitt for coming on the show. Great guest. And hopefully we'll be back. Hopefully Reed will be able to join us next week. Hopefully the Nets will be eliminated by then, so Reed can come back to joining the show. But thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff if you're watching on YouTube. Best of luck with your picks if you do decide to bet this weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.